Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Marc. Nick Simone is busy working on his dissertation, so I'm flying solo here at AMLE 22, an annual conference of middle school educators in Orlando, Florida. I have the good fortune of sitting down right now with the godfather of AMLE. He plays the big rooms, if you know what I mean. He has led 4 featured sessions this week and has informed and inspired countless attendees. Rick Wormeli is an educator of 42 years. He's an author of 9 books, including Meet Me in the Middle, Middle School Matters, and Fair Isn't Always Equal, as well as countless articles. He's a recipient of the Disney American Teacher Award, James P. Garvin Award from the New England League of Middle Schools for teaching excellence, service, and leadership, and most recently an inductee to the Legacy Circle of AMLE. He's a thought leader in areas of differentiation, grading, and many other aspects of education, and he's also a new grandpa. It's a pleasure to welcome Rick to the podcast.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
I'd like to begin with a line from your bio, which absolutely moved me. And you wrote, "I teach because I am deeply, unrepentantly grateful for life. And the most potent way I know to express that gratitude is to build a world worthy of the next generation, then give them the tools to make it their own." Did you have that view right out of the gate, or was there a particular journey that led you to that beautiful awakening?
Well, I've got to tell you, and it's going to be boring, but it's based on my parents. You know, in the 60s and 70s, as I was growing up, it was, what are you going to do to contribute to the world? And everything I did was in that regard, and that we find meaning and connection in that, not, oh, look, I have to sacrifice something in order to serve others. So I began to think in the 70s, as I was finishing high school and going to college, that the highest calling is to serve, so to speak. And I have to see that not as a bad thing or an inconvenience, but a joyous thing. And when I do that, I was far happier rather than the world owes me respite. I've worked hard, so I deserve this, almost an entitlement thing. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed to work so well with students that it wouldn't be so didactic in my classroom, top down. It would be, let me get to know you and honor what you bring to this equation. So you see yourself in what we're doing. And they had joy, mini epiphany and discovery. And I got more excited and discovered why I went into teaching. So I think there was the kernel of it, in teenage years. Mm-hmm. But this idea that I am so grateful for every day I'm vertical, and that I get to continue to do it. And that I have a job where I'm on the front line of humanity. And every day I laugh at silliness, but I also see a depth that I might not otherwise see in other professions. Mm-hmm. I feel very grateful for that. And I don't ever want to take it for granted that, because not all people are called to do this or have the inclination or disposition to want to do this thing called teaching, right, especially in today's toxic world. Yes. So when I wrote that, it was for a whole program on why do people teach? Really, let's get to the heart of that, because people were losing sight of what they were doing. They were adrift. And I think that when you temporarily and occasionally take stock, why am I doing this? And why am I not here and not there and so on? It ignites or maybe lights up a little of a path of a direction. And that one for me is my gratefulness, but my whole idea that I find happiness in the success of others rather than my own success. So I haven't really taught unless I have proof you've learned and been successful. And so I can't claim, I'm so happy to be a teacher when my kids are failing, that sort of thing. Right. So there's a sense of conscientiousness, I guess, there. But my parents, my mom was a pathologist, and she was about ethics and laboratory work. My dad worked for the Justice Department and police departments and things. And they just really instilled, you don't put up with lack of integrity. You don't put up with unethical behavior. You confront it. But sometimes people don't realize they're doing that. And so you can be gentle in approaching that. But I think that the roots came from mom and dad. And
you definitely refer to ethics often in your presentation this morning. Yeah. No. It speaks to how your life has been informed through the relationships that the critical relationships that you've had.
A lot of teachers, faculties, if you were to lean forward and say, hey, is this the ethical thing we do? They would roll their eyes in derision. We could have got on this meeting early, but you wanted to be philosophical, thing. And what
just tell us what to do, right?
Right, exactly. But also it borderline. It's actually totally inclusive of values, of politics, of sometimes faith, and we just want to learn, about the latest curriculum and the testing protocols. It gets too uncomfortable when you're that candid and that honest about your ethics and morals, because I think a lot of things we do in school are really an effort to minimize hypocrisy. We believe this is the way students learn, but we really don't do those systems in our class or our building. So to what degree are we going to tolerate hypocrisy or being adrift from what we not value as effective instruction? And it's always a negotiation with ourselves. And that's just so uncomfortable. We'd rather not talk about it, so we just sweep it under the rug. But I think, the whole idea of do the stuff that scares you, it really makes us a lot better, and we need to give people tools to do it.
To what extent are people kind of trying to adhere to the cultures that are established in their schools and their districts, or are they trying to establish or adhere to the goals set forth by more bureaucratic organizations like the state education departments?
Well, it's job security, economic security. Can I do the wise and wonderful things in the microcosm of my class, but translate it into the school district's language so I can keep my job?
Right.
Can I volunteer in committees to say, hey, maybe we should be questioning, should I question the status quo? Am I a new teacher? Am I a seasoned veteran teacher? To what degree am I guaranteed a job if I do this? And that's a really hard road today because principals are really searching for teachers, good teachers, because there's fewer of them going to the field and more leaving the field. And there's not this big pipeline, bringing them up.
That's right.
So to what degree do I tolerate you having a philosophy other than mine or other than the school district's? I don't know how far I can push you like that. And to what degree can I have you in front of children affecting their very futures?
Right.
So I think that most people right now are unusually terrified or anxious about the politics, the divisive toxicity that's out there. And they're yielding to that because it's comfortable, it's familiar, what they know. And they're not as persuaded to act upon a courage of conviction. I really believe this, so I'm going to manifest my actions to act on it, which is integrity. I believe this, so I literally express it in my classroom or my leadership or whatever it is. And that's getting harder to do when there's more and more pressure and accusations. And it becomes you're trying to be rational with an irrational person.
Right.
And they're responding from emotions rather than a logic or what modern pedagogical research indicates. And maybe one of the best gifts someone like me can do is to give you that courage. And in that courage, you find stamina to see it through to the sound principles rather than give up when you're first confronted with the pushback politically or a logistical mechanical element that eludes you. And that courage to follow that through and the stamina that subsequently comes is not easily found today because we're so tired of just trying to self-preserve our ego, our sense of just calm or serenity in the world that just seems so run amok.
Yes. And we're seeing that. I've been in education for 28 years, and the interactions with parents, which used to be relatively mild-mannered, have not remained that way. There's been a shift in terms of, I'll call it like the comfort level of inappropriateness that people feel is warranted or justified. Nobody takes the edge off of anything or pulls a punch anymore. And when they go after you, they come like full after you, which is a relatively new phenomenon that I've experienced in my education.
Well, and they also come after you without having done their homework.
Oh, well,
they're arguing from conspiracy theory.
Correct.
And again, I think that a lot of people, I don't want to misuse a word and be disrespectful of Native American people, but they get tribal only in the sense of I need to belong to a very specific group because then I feel protected because right now I feel so fragile. And so I need to have that affinity, whatever it is. But if I diverge from them and I'm on my own and I might be attacked and I don't have any of the bandwidth left to deal with those kinds of attacks. So it's just easier for me to do this, even though I know this stuff is wrong and I'm talking to my child's teacher in an inappropriate manner. But it's getting stronger and stronger because compromise is seen as weak when actually it's true strength. And
couldn't agree more.
It's like I'm threatened by diverse opinion rather than I see that as strength and coming together where we dimensionalize each other. And until we turn that corner, and to be really honest, there are a lot of people who, from different walks of life, so different factions where you're against them and it's us, them kind of stuff. But when they climb a mountain together or they do a service project together,
All of those
that
things.
all this stuff just it's expunged. It
Yeah.
falls away,
Right.
and you discover the true humanity. One of my favorite things to do is to take middle school kids on a week-long wilderness outdoor education experience.
You're
We
a
leave
brave
on a Monday,
man.
come back on Friday. Right. And we do that. We did it for years and years and years.
Wonderful.
And you're not allowed to bring any screens, any phones, any electronics.
Even
You have
better.
to come down to your true self. And we do Old Rag Mountain in Shenandoah National Park. We have a ropes course. We integrate subjects out there. And they come back fundamentally changed. And it's extraordinary things like it's really high up above the birds and the thermals, the rising air shafts of warm air, right? And so we're up there. And some of the kids who are the quote unquote cool kids in class, they're frightened and they're frozen. They're almost paralyzed. And the nerdier kids or the kids who don't normally get the accolades, they're saying, it's okay. I've got your belt loop. Let's walk along the edge together. You're going to be fine.
Wow.
And people have changed roles because the classroom allowed these sort of things to be expressed readily.
Right.
And so those students were the top elite, but these are the kids, the classroom wasn't a friendly place, but they had all these wonderful depth, and intelligence.
And in a new environment.
And a new environment. And we get down from the mountain, 7:00 at night, and we're going back, and it's that wonderful subconscious, good kind of tired, where things just rise up, and you can see farther in the night than you can during the day when you're distracted by everything else that's competing for your attention. And they fundamentally change relationships, and they grow so close, and they realize I am so much more than my grade, so much more than my technology, so much more than this. And I was pigeonholing you and classifying you and stereotyping you in that one category, and you're more than that, so let's be friends.
Right.
It is a little bit like the Breakfast Club, but for real, okay? And that kind of thing is huge, and there are so many communities now politically, let alone culturally, racially, that remain insular. They do not see the advantage in traveling, like, for example, outside the United States. In the museum in Washington, D.C., which is now closed, but you can do this still online, they have the front page of the front pages of all the newspapers in the world. So when I travel in Italy or Phuket or Thailand or Japan, I'm always looking to how the newspapers are publishing what happens in the United States. Just so you have all these different perspectives. But if people are insular, they only listen to that echo chamber. They don't see that as joyous or loving or a strength. They see it as threat, and that's a really big problem. So I'm a real big believer that every high school kid should take a year off and go travel to a country where he doesn't speak the language or know the customs. And I think teachers every 6 to 8 years should take a 1-year sabbatical, and they are paid for it to go just tour classrooms. And you come back fundamentally changed and much better teacher for having had that perspective.
Which used to be a thing. I mean, my parents were both educators in New York City, and I remember them taking sabbaticals and taking courses and recharging their batteries, and they weren't under even a quarter of the pressure that we're under now, because there's like this interesting irony about technology. The promise of technology is that you'll be able to do the same thing that you did yesterday, except now it'll be easier and faster. Except the reality of technology is you have to do 4 times as much because you have technology. So you used to be able to send a letter home to the families in your community, and that was it, and you were done. But now you have to post a letter, email the letter, text the letter, send a message, an electronic message to let everybody know that the letter is there. You got to post it here, post it there, email it to the PTSA, and so on and so forth. So the amount of work that you have to do because of technology has not saved anybody any time. As a matter of fact, it's like increased the amount of time that we spend, not to mention how reachable we all are. And
distracted by so many new things. Right,
and how accessible we all have, in a sense, been required to have become. I think the pandemic, this was all happening before the pandemic. The pandemic was just dumping a metric ton of gasoline on a fire. And it completely blurred the lines between home and school, because home was school.
Yeah. Good point.
Let's transition into some more classroom-related things, where certainly an area of your expertise. So a lot of ink has been spilled or pixelated, I guess, about homework. How do you explain why this topic is so controversial, and what is the solution in your eyes?
Okay, there's several fold responses, so I apologize if I ramble.
No, please.
A lot of people see homework as about control, and that's always going to be an us versus them, and about control and classroom management, as opposed to, is it really a functional, effective part of learning? And the research is really clear. About second grade and lower, there's absolutely no correlation between doing homework and subsequent achievement in school subjects. In middle school and high school, the correlation bubble is stunningly tiny. It's shocking. But a lot of teachers put all their eggs in that basket, and they'll say, well, I can't teach him. He doesn't do his homework. It's like, you have 999 other ways to teach. And so many teachers have no background in how do you cultivate maturity in children, just how you teach. But how do I get you to respect deadlines and get your act together for time management that you follow through on that? How do you do task analysis and break things down to smaller pieces so you're not overwhelmed doing it the last night? All that executive function stuff. And if you don't have that background, the only thing that comes to mind to get kids to do work is coercive or transactional. And the moment you make homework about a transaction, it becomes a problem and it becomes about a power play. So one of the things that I promote and many other people do, homework is practice. It is not, an assignment you do here or there, but it is practice of what has already been learned. Never to learn it the first time and never to be the demonstration of final proficiency in something. A safe place to wrestle and to really come to know, get feedback. And the idea that I practice and I get critique and it's not held against me is really radical for a lot of people. But a lot of teachers lord it over them because they feel really inept or inadequate to get you to do things. So what I do is I say, look, can I give you the overwhelming practicality we have about how do you motivate high school students, middle school students, elementary, whatever it is? What do we know about meaning making and voice and agency and executive function? So we build those skills rather than think you're teaching them merely by giving them grades on those skills, which is a false assumption that you're teaching. I held him accountable. I gave him a 0. Well, then he did it again. I gave him another 0, another 0. It's not working. And that's not the way you teach that stuff by just making it punitive. To me, that's a problem with schools of teacher ed that don't have a formal course on that. And I would like to change that rather dramatically because a heck of a lot of us, me included, that was one of our worries when we first became a teacher. What if they just don't do anything I ask? What if they walk out? What if they just laugh at me?
That's right. I mean, I'll share my own personal experience. When I first started, I was in a middle school in Brooklyn. And I remember vividly teachers on the first days of school lining their classes up in the hallways. This is true. And they held up their red pen and they walked up and down the rows. There were 2 lines of students and they walked in the middle and they walked up and down like Patton. And they said, this is the red pen and the red pen rules.
Oh, God.
And these are like the don't smile until Christmas days, right? Why have we always been kind of off on these really awful old world sort of philosophical tangents and practices? Where did they come from, and why are we holding on to them for dear life?
Well, when we are at uncertain times, and right now we're at a very fragile time in our world, and we're feeling attacked, and we're trying to self-preserve and all this stuff, we like quantifiable things, very black and white, very measured, whatever. And teaching and learning is a very messy, not quantifiable thing, not easily quantifiable. And so a lot of people are looking for an orderly schematic when it does not exist. And they operate from anxiety or fear that it's not this orderly schematic. And I could document exactly this and exactly this. Like that, I get so sick and tired of people comparing schools to businesses and say, well, that business would be bankrupt if you ran the schools. Ran schools like businesses, you wouldn't have this problem. Nothing could be farther from the truth. They're not even close to that.
That's right.
And if I enter into a relationship with you, it makes me vulnerable to you. If I care so much about you. And that some of the best discipline, some of the best assessment and teaching is relational. And so I get you to care about it because you and I enter into mutual ethos. I'm out for your success as much as you're out for mine. Not, you just do your job, I do my job, and we keep the 2 together. Now to separate it out. And until such time as people realize that it's a collaboration to do this thing called school, we don't do it to them, we do it with them, you will operate most predominantly from a place of fear and the lack of knowledge of these things. And that tends to be very black and white, quantifiable, strict. But what's really interesting is when you teach to engender hope, not despair or not black and white, all the hope is gone, all this stuff, it's way more demanding. The brain is out for self-preservation in terms of emotions and dignity, but also just energy, glucose, glycogen, flowing along neural pathways. And so if I teach in the way you best learn, I can take you to the moon without a lot of cajoling. You'll follow along. But if I don't teach you the way you best learn, you will find a way to avoid because you're going to self-preserve ego. I'd rather you thought I was scatterbrained irresponsible, then I can't do this stuff, and I don't want the world to know that they have more ammunition with which they can reject me. We talked about it during the session here at the conference, in fact, about that. And so I think that a lot of people who get into, oh, what do we really know? The idea that there's no such thing as laziness as a natural resting state. It is always a state of coping with something else that's going on that we can't handle, or it's beyond, we're out of our depth.
Wow.
The lack of sleep. I have test anxiety. And what about my girlfriend? My mother is on opioids, or we have 4 kids. I'm a 5th grader, and I'm taking care of my siblings while my mom or dad works 4 jobs. That kind of thing. There's so many things beyond it. But unless
it's only magnified during the pandemic, of course.
Absolutely.
Right.
Unless there was damage by forceps at birth or oxygen deprivation, we are literally hardwired to want to belong to others, to be successful, to do complex, demanding things. In my experience, and every experience of veteran teachers with whom I work, I say, look, kid spends 30 minutes on a math problem or a puzzle, and they have moderate euphoria because it all comes together. That's fine. I got it. When I walk close to them, they look up at me eagerly, and they say, give me another one.
That's right.
The reward for hard work is more hard work. So I have to tell them, you're going soft when you let them redo for full credit. You're going to be soft when they could turn it in late, and you're not going to give it, grade lower for each day late.
That's
no,
right. And I've heard
what's
that.
going soft is letting them cop out. And really, it's a teacher cop out to remove the burden of their learning. What's demanding is get on the bike and ride it again and again. In other words, I'm going to work with you from a place of hope, because you're going to feel more compelled to actually put energy into it and to recover from the mistake than you would if I just give you this permanent unrecoverable 0 and the false assumption that that's teaching you some maturity thing.
Right.
What it actually, we have like Tom Guskey, Susan Brookhart, lots of wonderful researchers. Every low grade a middle school or high school kid gets, let alone elementary, pushes them away from investing in the teacher in the class and listening to your message of maturation. And one of the things that I really need to get across is that incompetence in something where they don't learn it for whatever emotional reason or whatever is never maturing or preparatory. Competence, really learning it, is. So it's not an error, it's a choice. Choose the kid learns it. So he screwed up, he used his time poorly, he plagiarized. What is the number one response when somebody cheats? They get a 0. The question is it recoverable in full? If they went back, they did the new curriculum, but they went back and did this other curriculum where they were very unethical all over again, and had to rebuild the trust that was now lost.
Right.
So I do a whole training just on plagiarism and cheating, which has only just become a tsunami during COVID.
That's right.
With people just borrowing digitally all over. Yeah, absolutely. And I work with distance learning teachers quite a bit. How do we make sure no one's cheating, that sort of thing? And so that's a whole other thing we can talk about at some point. But that integrity and stuff, kids desperately want the teachers to have integrity and be ethics and see them as somebody honorable, worth spending time with me.
Of course,
and
they're
that
making an
stuff.
investment.
And that doesn't happen when you're black and white and you just kind of crack a whip, blind to the students you serve. They're full individuals, not one more paper to grade. So I think there's a lot going on there, but I'm looking at, in particular, pre-service and in-service training regarding what we know about cultivating maturity, compassion, integrity in students, other than using grades.
So what do you say to the hardliner who has been for 20 or 30 years practicing the, if they don't do the homework, they get a 0 mentality and mindset? And how do you supportively break that bad habit and let them walk away feeling that they're actually more empowered as opposed to weakened by abandoning what they once held was true?
I wrote a piece one time called The Grief of Accepting New Ideas.
Great title.
And you really go through a grieving process when you're being asked to let go of one thing while reaching for another. It stings. It's a blow to ego. I've been doing this wrong the whole time. You're telling me that?
Right.
I'd rather not be incompetent again because I'm used to being competent.
Right.
That kind of thing. And so it is very scary. It's a blow to it. And when you confront people with their hypocrisy, it doesn't always go well. So I have to be very gentle in that and in myself. So one, I incredible gratitude and model when somebody corrects me and points out my hypocrisy. You keep saying this, but you do that. How do you explain yourself? How do you reconcile the two? And so one of the things that I firmly believe, and I got this from Doug Reeves decades ago, but it has served me well, and I'm re-emphasizing it here, that you always start with what you have in common. So I will say, do you think grades should be accurate? What's the role of homework? Why do we have school?
So
Why,
go go big, and then
go big, and then say, how are our actions and policies in alignment with that? Because nobody wants to be out of alignment with their beliefs. So you say this in that faculty room. Oh yeah, I believe all children can learn. It's up to me to find the right pathway. And then we go to your classroom and you do one size fits all a heck of a lot of the time.
Right.
And you're not even attentive to seeing how the kids are different. And then that means you can't inform your lessons. You can't respond to stuff you don't know, is it going on? So what are you doing to actually maintain being vigilant about learning about the kids day in and day out as they change? And then how does that inform what you do in your lesson design? And so I think it's a gentle way of confronting hypocrisy to say, what do we believe together in common? Great. Let's take a look at our policies and see if they match. Right. And that helps people kind of get into it. Second thing I love to do is I say, do you claim that you're preparing kids for the next levels or the working world or whatever? That's fine. Great. Let's take a look at what they do in the working world. Oh, look how they do evaluations. None of it is the traditional grading that you're doing.
That's right. Nothing
or whatever it is, the differentiated stuff. And you would never, ever tolerate having your earlier incompetence averaged in with your current, wonderful level of competence, because it would knowingly falsify that report.
Right.
And so you would never tolerate somebody looking at how you park your car in the parking lot in the morning as a piece of evidence about your effectiveness as a teacher with seventh graders, right? So why do you include evidence of things not about that standard in the report of that standard?
Right.
It just seems, it's a gentle thing. So one of my favorite things is the common stuff and compare it to the working world. And then when it's emotionally safe, hypotheticals and scenarios, we sit in small groups and we say, here's a very real challenge right here. What would a teacher representing the modern pedagogical era and very full of integrity, ethics, and so on, what would they choose to do in response? And so I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. And it's very safe for me to say, I concur, which sounds very professional. But I agree. But secretly in your mind's eye, you're going, wow, I do that stuff they said was bad. I'm going to stop doing that because I see from my peers. But it's emotionally safe. If you come to me in the moment where it's very urgent off the top of my head, I made that decision. One, it's not really well thought out, but I don't have the dimensionalization of my colleagues. So one of the things I believe in is rehearsal of response. So we literally take on a lot of these issues and we collect them from all over. And I've got a bunch I can share with people if you want.
Yeah.
But it's literally like, what if a kid cusses you out and uses the F word or MF or because what does a good teacher do at that moment? What if a kid, you worked with him for 3 or 4 times, giving all this feedback, and he keeps turning in roughly the same thing? What do you do? I mean, it's real stuff.
And those are real.
In a small group over here, and it's become dysfunctional because of a clique that's mean-spirited, and one kid is doing all the work. What do you do? It's like Keanu Reeves in the movie Speed in the elevator shaft. What do you do? Pop quiz. And so we rehearse that. Now, when it really happens in my classroom, I can draw upon that. I am fortified. I am provisioned mentally instead of just responding off the top of my head. But if you've never spent time doing that, it becomes a problem. Another element of that, and I got a lot of this through National Board Certification. I was in that very first group to become National Board Certified in 95, 96. Wow. We went through that. It was, are you willing to be videoed? Because video doesn't lie. And we are all teachers. We are so subjective. We don't see that those 3 kids were staring out the window of your door the whole time. You thought they were paying attention.
That's right.
And sort of stuff. So the idea that somebody would sit with you and a video of your class or just observe your class and do peer observation and critique. And again, you could set up whole programs to do that and have it very safely done where it's clinical, analytical, not judgmental. And it's very much about connecting dots.
So it's not about your ego.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But colleagues do it with one another, right? And I say, I noticed you did this. As a result, this is what happened with students. Talk to me about that. Is that in alignment with what you wanted? Would you do it differently next time? So you become this instructional coach rather than an evaluator. And if teachers begin to see themselves as that feedback is not threatening, but it is indeed valuable. Like if I went to any teacher or principal and I said, I noticed what you did there. I wonder if later today you might have some time for some feedback. Everybody gets tense and defensive. Oh no, I screwed up, right? And what we want to do is, no, feed me. How can I possibly improve and do this right unless I have that critique? So those are probably 3 or 4 ways I would have a foot through the door
Mm-hmm.
to begin to change some thinking. There are times, though, where we can anonymously put an article up there and play innocent.
Mm.
I've done this, play dumb when really I'm not.
Right.
And I go, this article says this of the latest research, yet you do this. I'm having a trouble reconciling it because I really respect what you do, but I also see the logic of the article. Can you help me? And by them looking at it and trying to help me, they might arrive at the discovery themselves. If I point that out to them, it's passive, they get defensive right away.
Well, I've done a lot of research in the world of change and how people change, and really the number one thing over and over again that you find is that people just won't change unless they want to.
Yeah.
Ultimately, right? There has to be something that in them that wants to change.
Well,
somewhere in there.
Remember Peter's saying quote that so many people use? People don't mind changing. What they mind is being changed. By some other outside folks. So I don't mind changing and evolving. Most teachers are cool with that.
Right.
But when I'm being forced to change, and I'm being changed by others,
then we get rigid.
And one of the biggest stressors actually the indicators of healthy stress versus chronic stress is your sense of control in the situation. Mm-hmm. So if I don't feel like I'm in control of the change, then I really resent it and I push back. But one of the things we learn when people in education in particular have to resort their thinking and change, the default number one response is crankiness. I worry when people don't get cranky and push back and say, yeah, what about? Or bring it up and get a little cynical, because that's the way humans sort their thinking and push and really get to clarity. So welcome it as a healthy thing. Doug Reeves, once again, at one time, again, decades ago, he said, if you're trying to change something in a school and it doesn't cause at least some of the faculty to cry out in pain, it's probably not the thing you should be changing. And I thought that was pretty valuable.
I love that.